Welcome to Fit Club Vegas, the ultimate fitness destination for visitors. Drop in for a day pass and experience our 10,000 square foot fitness playground. At Fit Club, you'll find state-of-the-art equipment and a sound system so good you'll pitch your headphones. Conveniently located 7 to 12 minutes from the Las Vegas Strip, Fit Club is a perfect spot for you to come get your pump while visiting Sin City. So come check us out at 4525 West Hacienda, Las Vegas, Nevada. Fit Club Vegas, more than a gym, it's a vibe.
Pacific West Injury Law. Injured? Call 602-HURT. Car accident? Call 602-HURT. Our firm is dedicated to you and your recovery.
How should I introduce Ed? I don't even know how. There's so many things I can introduce. So I would say, I know you said this in your book, and you talked about your the success stories, and you said, you know, in your book you quoted, I don't know, I still think Jay Cutler would have found his way even if I was not involved, but you are the reason that so many people have found greatness and realized their abilities because, I mean, founder of Gold's Gym, you know, second dad to a lot of people, even considered the father figure in a lot of people's lives, including myself. I mean, you were a great, great asset to my early stage of my career. And you know, this is, like I was telling Matt, one of the bucket list people we wanted to have on. So Ed Connors, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's good to see you again, man. We catch up. But I feel like I've seen you more over the last year, though, than I've seen you in the past, almost.
We keep running into each other at these fitness events, which I love going to Europe.
You love the Europe shows. You were at Prague.
Yeah, I've been going for 60 years, and Prague was incredible. It reminded me of, people said, why do you go to Europe so much? And I said, well, at least for the bodybuilding, it reminds me of the U.S. 10, 20 years ago. You would not, you know, you'll be at FIBO, I suppose, in April.
Yes. And
you wouldn't find 200,000 people like that in America right now. You wouldn't find the same level of testosterone or young males that are.
So you feel like it's thriving in Europe right now?
It is. Yes. I mean, they've always been kind of behind the U.S. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but you know, there are some incredible European bodybuilders right now in Spain and Czech Republic and Portugal, Germany. I don't really see that in the U.S. right now.
Tell me the experience at Prague, how loud the crowd was and everything for Chris Bumstead when you were there.
Well, it had, and I told Chris Bumstead, I think at least 6 years ago, he should compete in the Open. I said, let's see how the public reacts. And I have never seen that kind of reaction. Again, it had been 20 years since I'd seen that kind of reaction. There were over 2,000. It was a sold-out, venue.
Okay.
And the crowd was on their feet, surging forward when they were, posed down. And I've known Matt a long time too, although he's only like 27. But no, it was it reminded me of past events in the U.S.
So the energy was crazy.
Crazy energy. Yeah.
And who did you think won that show?
I thought Matt
Chris or Martin Fitzwater.
I thought Martin deserved to win.
Okay.
But it was close. He just had a little more muscle. I think if Chris had gone in a bit heavier, he could have probably won it. I mean, he had just rebounded from his classic, and but yeah, it was. I had a front row seat, so I would say, based on what I could see, Martin deserved to win.
There was a lot of mixed things we talked about that with. People get confused now between classic and bodybuilding, and you come way back. I mean, I want to talk a little bit. I know it's repetitive, but like you started really getting into the bodybuilding culture when you bought Gold's Gym. Right?
Right, because it was even then called the Mecca. It's now been 60 years since Joe Gold started Gold's Gym. And because of the movie Pumping Iron, it became known as the Mecca of bodybuilding rather quickly. And people don't understand, but back in the early 80s when we started franchising, a lot of our gyms held competitions, Gold's Classic. I think you even...
Yeah, of course, yeah.
That was the one you won.
Yeah.
Matarazzo, DeMeo from your area, everybody competed in, because it was a great way for a gym to gain publicity by putting up a poster in a competing gym saying, we've got a bodybuilding contest we're going to put on. And so it was free publicity for the gyms, which was invaluable.
I know your past, and a lot of people have kind of heard your journey, but, you're an architect by trade, and you were military also. Right. But how did when did you really start to eye bodybuilding as something where, it became a lifelong journey for you in the end?
It would be when I was in college. I knew I was going to be drafted for Vietnam, so I joined a gym to lose weight for the Army. And it wasn't a great experience back then. It was, they get you in a locked room and browbeat you and try and get you to buy a $500,000 membership, whatever. They were very expensive back then. But then I started looking at the magazines to get, help.
That was the only outlet at that point, right?
The only outlet for training. And so I would see bodybuilders, and I guess because I had that architect eye, I would see people in the magazine, some of whom I thought, well, they don't really look that great, and others looked incredible. So I think early in the 60s, I started...
and this is in the Midwest is where you grew up, right?
I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, but I went to school at UC Berkeley.
Okay.
And that was my first introduction to really California lifestyle, and I made some trips to L.A. I even visited Gold's Gym when I was...
The original one. Talk a little bit about that so people have an idea, like square footage-wise, being an architect.
That was... that's why I wrote the book. People need to understand the history.
Show us a little bit of... so this is your book here.
This is the book. It's been out now 3 years, and when I bought Gold's Gym with Pete Grimkowski and Tim Kimber in 1979, 46 years ago, it was 90 by 50 square feet, 90 by 50 feet, so 4,500 square feet. The original Gold's Gym in Pumping Iron, which is down in Venice, was 4,200 square feet. One of the conditions when we bought the club from Ken Sprague was that I would convert his the gym into a legal residence. So I actually did the drawings of the gym in Pumping Iron. I know it was 4,200 square feet. That's the size of a couple of aerobics rooms nowadays.
I mean, this space is 2,500, so you can imagine it's, barely.
I'm assuming back then you didn't need as much space because there probably wasn't many members.
He can talk a lot about male versus female, like it didn't, the females didn't exist.
Yeah. It was Arnold and a few friends in the original gym. And when we moved it back to Venice in 1981, we took the first bay of a 4-bay warehouse, which was 9,100 square feet. And that was considered huge. Yeah. And over time, over 9 years, it evolved to 26,000 square feet, which became the one gym fits all for about 20 years. This gets into what people don't understand about change. So in other words, until about the turn of the century, that gym was the model for all gyms in the world over. And then it began to split up where you had expensive gyms and low-cost gyms. But when I opened my first franchise, my first Gold's Gym franchise in 1980, it was only, we were charging $19 a month, which was equivalent to $55 in today's money. But back then that was cheap or affordable. So Gold's Gym really pioneered short-term memberships and affordable membersps.
Yeah, because it wasn't. What competition was there?
Well, you had the European Health Spa, the Jack LaLanne European Health Spa, and they were again, $1,000, somewhere like $3,000. I don't know whether it was a year, a 5-year, or a lifetime, but it was ridiculous membership prices. All chrome and the wood rollers.
And that Gold's Gym original, someone lives in that location
right,
now.
Actually, the person who lives there now invited me. He's trying to get it declared a historical landmark, but it's not 100 years old. It's only 60. But he's a merchant seaman. He's the captain of one of those huge cargo ships.
But it still says Gold's Gym.
So, yeah, he kept all that, wanting to make it a landmark.
I used to love when I stayed out at your place. I remember I would ride the bike. We'll talk about the bike story. I rode a 10-speed bike to the gym and put me on that. That got stolen, by the way, because he told me, he said, I'm telling you, you got to lock this thing up. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I grew up, he knew where, he came to my house where I grew up. And he knows, like, we left our keys in our cars.
Yeah.
And I didn't believe it. And then I came out one morning, I had no transportation to the gym because they stole my bike. But I'm sure they stole a lot other than that.
I lost 6 bikes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't feel so bad now because I think you were pretty upset at the time.
I don't know if I was. I hope I wasn't that upset. But because Günther Schlierkamp and his wife were staying at my place, and they got around on their bikes. They locked their bikes up, and both were stolen. So someone had to have had a truck with a crane that would lift up the bikes.
Yeah, because they were inside. Like, you had this gated walkway, and I put the bike in there at night, and I'm like, no one's going to jump over. I mean, the walls were high, but they found a way to do it. But that was, so when I used to ride the bike, I'd always ride down, and sometimes I'd go by because coming from Massachusetts, like, we read this, we saw the pumping iron films, and we saw it in the books, and there was more talk about the original Gold's Gym, which I feel like now it's not as much of a landmark where your original, like, where you moved the gym when expanded it, because we'll talk about the room expansions, but that's like the Mecca, or no one even really, they think that, Arnold lifted at that gym, which really wasn't the case.
Right.
Did he ever train at this current Gold's Gym besides now?
Well, he didn't.
He was at World Gym.
Well, he was loyal to Joe Gold.
Yes.
Who and coincidentally died in 2004, which is when I sold out. So actually, I would say Pete, Tim, and I were on better terms with Arnold and his assistants than Joe Gold even when he died, because Arnold owned World Gym for a couple of years. And when Joe Gold thought he was dying or in really bad shape, so he gave it to Arnold, and Arnold lost money, and so Joe Gold gave Arnold his building as a compensation, but then Arnold gave it back to him. He lost money with the gym. In fact, I remember running into Arnold at his restaurant back then, Shotzi's.
Shotzi, yeah.
And he said, Ed, how come your gym is so crowded and mine's empty? And I said, well, it's the stereo system. And he laughed. He thought I was making a joke. But, World Gym was like a church. And
they didn't have music there.
And no music. And back then, I mean, that's one thing that's changed with the gyms, which I don't think is great. It's everyone's on their headset or Spotify and, earbuds, their own little world. But back then, the sound system made it was, you felt like you were in this disco, this room.
And it was engaging. People would engage with each other. I mean, we talk about this a lot. Yeah. Like, obviously when you work, like, he works out of home. So, like, he gets out, and a lot of times going to the gym, it's like that's the only social environment you'll be in. Not to say he goes to the gym and talks to everybody, but it's like you actually witness people.
Well, it's become like Starbucks hopes to be the third space. We built a community. We were a family. So you had home, work, and the gym. And back then, without social media, people like you, I'm sure, when you first came out, you would actually you train, then you go down to the firehouse, and you come back and hang out because you didn't want to miss anything.
Yeah,
there was no social media.
It was like the WeWork place, but just to hang out and like watch people work out and whatever. I mean, you never wanted to. That's one thing I can say about Gold's Venice is I literally could spend 8 hours there and never get bored. It's like it seems like that was the thing.
Well, and I could go to work there for 25 years and never be bored because every day was different. I mean, one day, I run into you in the gym, and I remember the conversation. Where are you staying?
Yeah. I was staying at a total shithole. Well, I mean, I'm a kid, and I wanted because this is where, like, this was a turning point in my life. I mean, I mentioned this a lot. So, I win the teen nationals. And I'm still kind of like, I'm getting a little publicity because the magazines are so far behind. There's no social media. So I get this deal on the Boston Globe newspaper for $99 round trip from Boston, American Airlines. Chris Aceto told me about it. The USAs in 93 are happening at, where were the USAs at that year? It was in like Santa Monica, wherever.
There's Santa Monica Auditorium.
Yeah, so that's where they were being held. Chris Cormier won that. But I came out. He said, you got to go to Gold's Gym. And we walked from a place on Lincoln. I don't even know where it was. You went and drove me and picked me back.
You were on
us up and moved us out.
Bad hotel on Pico.
Yeah, it was a motel.
Yeah, motel, yeah.
So we walked, Kerry and I at the time. And Ed was, I always tell this story because there was a backwards glass in the top of the gym. It was like a mirrored glass, and Ed his offices were next door, and you could visually see what was going on in the gym. And I think you spotted us down there. I was trained. I had bleached blonde hair, and I had, I was pretty big coming off Teen Nationals. And you came up to me, and you're like, "Who are you? And like, what are you doing here? And where are you staying?" And I told him, and he's like, "Oh gosh, I need to get you out of there." And he immediately says, "Okay, I'm going to drive you back to the hotel, and I'm going to put you up at your house." And I'm like, "Wow, like." I'm a kid, and I'm like, "You sure?" And you're like, and I had Kerry with me at the time, and I always tell this story because, you'd never let the female stay there. You know what I mean?
No, I did. I mean, it was, but then it got to be a problem.
Yes, yeah.
Actually, it's ironic. It was right after you, well, it was actually because of Lee Priest, who said that I actually had to get some rules in place.
Okay.
But getting back to your situation, got to keep in mind for our listeners that this is the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, this was 93, so.
Only 10% of America had even been on a plane. And almost all my house guests that are people I met like you, this is their first time on a plane, first time going west, first time actually in an environment where they're meeting other people who have the same goals or train as hard as they do. So my house became kind of a guru house because there were other people there with the same.
Hey guys, Jay Cutler here. If you have not heard already, I launched my own TRT clinic. TRT Kingdom is now live. If you guys want to schedule your consultation, please click the link below and you'll get all the information you guys need for better health.
Dream.
I know, but you invited us to stay. We packed up our stuff from that dump hotel, and we went to your place, and you took us to dinner, and we went to a movie. Like we just hung out like the whole time, and of course we were there to spectate the show. And I got to see everybody. Wheeler was in the gym at that point, and like the Barbarian Brothers, and I mean everyone, actors. I mean, there were so many people. I mean, the list. I try to think of all the people I saw on a daily basis there. I mean. Who are some of the top celebrities that you can just name off a few names that trained at Gold's at that point?
Well, and again, I'm one of these people not good at picking celebrities out.
But Jimmy Kahn was there.
Jimmy was probably one of my favorites because he actually tried to help a lot of members, with breaking into the entertainment area. Ray Liotta was a regular. The actors came and went depending on what they needed to do. For Charlie Sheen, when he needed to, I think he was playing.
Magic Johnson was there.
Magic Johnson was there a lot. Stallone until he got his divorce. So it was quite a range. I mean, my favorite was probably The Fly, the actor that just won for Wicked, was in the movie Wicked. I'm blanking on his.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
Anyway.
Don't fall asleep now.
Yeah, like when someone said, "Ed, there's 50 Cent," I looked down at my feet for 2 quarters. It was a rap star.
Yeah,
but see, I don't listen to rap. I don't know that whole world.
That's great.
So,
I mean, at the time, but Arnold wasn't training there.
No.
I mean, he was stuck at
he
Gold.
was
World Gym was around the corner, so it was literally half a mile down the street.
And Powerhouse was there too.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. But so Arnold was loyal to Joe Gold, and I understand that. But we were on very good terms. He would drop by the gym and find people.
I'm trying to think if they had the third room when I was there in '93.
We finished that it took 9 years. We moved there, so it would have been done.
Okay.
Yeah. When Pete, Tim, and I bought the gym in 1979, there was not one bike in the gym. Can you imagine? There was no cardio.
And whose idea was it to put the cardio platforms?
Mine.
Okay.
Because I said, well, this is a boring activity, so why don't we put it over the toilets and the maintenance room in the back, so when you're on your bike, you can look down and see what's going on in the gym.
Which was a huge plus. I mean, I used to see everyone up there riding bikes and visually looking at everything.
And then when TVs got big, we put it in the fourth room. We lined the bikes up in front of a big television screen.
Yeah.
We didn't call it cardio theater, which is now trademarked. We called it bikes in front of the gym,
But it's mostly bikes. It wasn't because like now you have the advancement of so many other pieces of equipment now,
toys,
step mills and all that.
Yeah.
How did it come about where you were able to buy Gold's Gym?
Well, the previous owner that we bought, there were several. Joe Gold sold it to someone, to two guys who, one of the guys eventually bought out the other and then sold it to Ken Sprague. And Ken Sprague's wife, Marion, was really running the gym. And she died unexpectedly from a rare cancer. And so, Ken did not want to deal. The gym was losing money. I saw the books.
And where was it located at this
It was
point?
at 1452 2nd Street.
Okay.
So in other words, because of the success of pumping iron, Ken Sprague moved it from Venice, where there was no parking, down to Santa Monica, where there was a parking structure across the street. And he thought, the gym would be more mainstream, more popular. So that's when we bought it. But we were having problems with the Santa Monica police. They were arresting our members for jaywalking. It was.
So you actually bought that location, but kind of tell the story how it came about, because I know you were moving to Orlando or something.
Well, actually, I'd been laid off work as an architect, and in my travels to find a new job, one was to interview with Disney to work on Epcot. They were just building that, and I went over to Orange Avenue Gym in Orlando to see a friend of mine, and there was Pete Krimkowski behind the counter, and he was the biggest human being I'd ever seen. And I said, God, I just came from a job interview in L.A. You belong out there at Gold's Gym. You should, one of Weeder's Mr. World contest was coming up. And he said, well, I'd love to go, but I'm broke. I'm going through a divorce. I have no money. I have no car. And I said, well, if I take that job, I'll fly you out. You can, stay with me till you get on your feet. And sure enough, I sent him a plane ticket. I can still remember it was a $186 plane ticket. And he stayed with me for a while. And then several years later, he called me up and said, Ed, Gold's Gym is for sale. Are you interested? And I thought I'd be investing with, a dozen people or more. But it was just me and one other person and Pete. And we bought the gym for $100,000 in 1979.
Did you have good money then?
No, I had saved $15,000 to buy a new BMW. So that's what it took to buy.
And how much was a new BMW at that point?
$15,000.
Okay. Shows how much it was, yeah.
So
Good one for 15.
that got me eventually 25% of Gold's Gym.
And that you bought the location, the original location.
We
on
took over the
Second Street.
lease.
Okay.
All we were buying was the equipment and name. And the gym was losing money. There were like a half a dozen people that were interested, but we bought it with. I should have brought the contract, but it was all of 4 pages.
And what were you nervous to do that, or
not really? Because I had my own architecture firm at the time. If I hadn't been in business for myself and know what it is to make payroll, I don't think I would have done it. I would have been afraid because I was. But I had a small architectural firm with a half a dozen employees, so I had the confidence to say, well, yeah, we could. And
so Pete was in with it, but also Tim was in, and that was Pete's buddy, right?
Not initially. Tim came in later.
Okay.
A short time later, it was another person who fell out with Pete. But Pete and Tim had been training partners back in Rochester, New York.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about Gold's Gym. I mean, Pete was a phenomenal bodybuilder. I mean, but he became like kind of the face guy of the gym. And
here's Pete, Tim, and I got a Lifetime Achievement Award from.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, Jay would thank you.
I just came out last year. This was last year.
Yeah, the same week that Jay was getting a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Arnold, Pete, Tim, and I were getting a Lifetime Achievement Award from Gold's Gym International, which is kind of appropriate since we actually opened the first franchise. So that got the ball rolling.
Yeah, talk about the clothing of Gold's Gym and the whole Gold's Gym logo. Talk a little bit about that. Well,
I joke with people that we were really a clothing company masquerading as a gym chain, and this is one of our early flyers we would send out to.
As soon as I opened it, I think of Conan, the Gold's Gym at the top. Remember the movie cover? Oh, the same colors, the gold, the red.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I did when I bought the gym was to clean up the typeface, and we eventually got rid of the. Well, not got rid of him, but we added the more modern guy rather than the bald-headed guy with the bent barbell.
Okay.
And the round logo I'm very proud of. and it's, in fact, we were.
That's your WBF folder. Okay, we'll talk about that. So, was there a certain peak of the clothing that you were selling for shirts? Like, and who was like, how were you printing these shirts and
we actually
distributing?
It was a place called Ace Trophy down the street on Rose printed our T-shirts, and actually we were printing them in the second and third bay of the building initially before we turned it over to Jim. Yeah, so we were in the clothing business, and back in the day, you could make silk screen a T-shirt for $2.25, sell it to our gyms for $4.50. They would retail it for $9.95, so everybody made money. We doubled it. So I still today don't understand why people are paying $20, $30 for a T-shirt, which actually still costs really only $2.25.
Well, I mean, for just a shirt, but then you have to screen it and everything else.
Yeah, but if in quantity, I think you could still get it done. And the quality of the shirts is still incredible. I mean, it's as good as it was back then. There were no foreign sources back then. It was all the Southeast U.S.
So you set up a pro shop in the front,
right?
And you were selling the merch, and then obviously when you franchised, you offered it to the
right.
So the gym was generating revenue that way.
I think a good franchisee could do $15,000 a month in retail. I don't think that's possible now because the whole retail world has changed. But so they would be doing $15,000, with probably a profit of $7,000. And that would pay our franchise fee was $1,000 a month, so that they were actually, the products alone were paying for their use of the name.
And at your peak, how many franchisees were there?
We had 704 when we sold in 2004. There are now 523.
Was there a specific goal you were trying to get to before you decided to go and sell the gym?
I wanted to get to several thousand.
What was the obstacle? What kept you from getting there?
Well, I thought if we sold, we would have someone who would. The reason I looked for a buyer back in 1995, and we sold 4 years later, was 24-Hour Fitness on the West Coast and Town Sports International on the East Coast were buying our more successful operations. It's a wiser move or a cheaper move to buy an existing gym that is making money than to start your own. Greenfield, they call them. So they were buying up our clubs. I mean, again, we'd been franchising for 15 years at that point. So there were owners who wanted to retire, wanted to sell. They were having a conflict with their partner, whatever. So we started bleeding, and we needed to find solutions. So I thought, well, if we can go public. We could find a buyer with money, a private equity company, and that would stop the bleeding, which it did. I mean, we grew. When Pete, Tim, and I sold first time in '99, we had 535 gyms. 5 years later, when they exited the Brockway Moran, we had 704. So, I mean, if that trajectory could have, I think, continued had the people they sold to been better. But they sold to a Texas billionaire oil guy who basically ruined the brand.
And how many members at its peak did Gold's Gym Venice have when you were in control of it?
We had 12,000 members. They now, I understand, have 8,000. So then this is why I'm working on a new gym concept, because millennials and Gen Z are they're not like the people I knew in the 80s and 90s. They want a different experience. And the big problem after COVID is that baby boomers aren't going back to the gym in the same number. And while they weren't a key component for a gym making money, they were enough of a membership base that without them or a decreased number, gyms are hurting right now.
Do you feel it's pricing or the square footage of gyms?
Actually, it's just the opposite. It's like right now, I mean, every I can remember when Lifetime Fitness was charging $125 a month. They're now over $300.
Yes.
Equinox over $300. You go to LA and these pop-up gyms, which in the old days would have been $30, $40 a month, they're now closer to $80. So it's like the $20 hamburger. Somehow during COVID, we went from $5 to $20 for a hamburger. So somehow during COVID now, we've gone from gym memberships being under 50 to 100. Gold's Gym Venice now is $125 a month. So, in other words, the gyms are all getting fewer members. So it's like a restaurant; they've got to charge more to survive. But on the other hand, I call it kind of going back to the future. When people come to me and want to hire me to consult on their new gym, I say, well, you got to go under 10,000 square feet, $1 a foot a month, and really do your homework, because the big box gyms are in trouble. It's back to the future. The smaller gyms are the one viable, but if they're too small or in the wrong market, you're just buying yourself a job, which might appeal to some people, but
so it's not going to make money. It's just going to turn dollars.
It's going to just give you an income, a livelihood.
Look at the most successful gyms around here now. They're all 8,000-9,000 square feet.
And Vegas is a good example of where a gym under 10,000 square feet can do okay. But Vegas is somewhat unique. I mean, it's a big city. There aren't many cities like this in America with 350,000 people within a 5-mile radius.
And how many gyms at your peak did you actually have ownership in?
I had 37. I interest in 37 Gold's Gym franchises.
And did you own any of those sole ownership?
No. I had working partners. I would find people who were passionate about the business and then go in partners with them. Because it's a service business. You can't see. I don't know how 24-hour or LA Fitness can do it, because you've got to have people with passion running that and building community.
You had some great people that were involved.
Yeah.
I mean, Rich Gaspari ran some of your gyms. I mean, some of these other people ran a lot of your.
Yeah,
gym
Rich
locations.
was never an owner, but he was an employee. Dave Zachary, who was his roommate, is still working for equipment companies. You may see him tomorrow or next day at the Health and Fitness Association convention. It used to be called URSA.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Talk a little bit about the like the WBF, for example. Vince McMahon started a bodybuilding federation. I think it was 1988 or 9.
I don't remember the exact date, but this was a brochure. Actually, Vince McMahon at one point in the early 80s wanted to buy Gold's Gym. Keep in mind, again, just like people don't realize Gold's Gyms were putting on bodybuilding contests all over America, Vince McMahon was growing his federation, and so his wrestlers were popping up all over America and training at the local Gold's Gym. So they would wear a Gold's Gym T-shirt. This is back in the day where there weren't all the standards there are now for that kind of publicity. So they would wear the Gold's Gym and then rip it off in the ring,
like Hulk Hogan, yeah.
Get publicity, and every night in America, 15,000 people were seeing a wrestling match somewhere, and they were televised, many of them. So he thought he was giving us all this free publicity. He might as well own it. So we entered negotiations, but he thought we wanted too much money. But then after that, he started the World Bodybuilding Federation, which, I mean, Vince McMahon is a genius in terms of marketing the wrestling, but I think he totally misunderstood the bodybuilding world.
What do you think was the miss for him? Was it the talent pool that was available? Because, this is the whole thing with Weider at the time, and you were close to Joe Weider.
I was very close to Joe.
So how did that, because you were, you had these guys passing through your place, and obviously, I mean, you had a relationship with McMahon.
I think of his dozen athletes, 7 or 8 of them were former house guests. And, it just was it was just too corny, just all.
It was a spectacle. I mean,
yeah, a spectacle, and it wasn't really a competition. It was like wrestling. It was.
But they always say bodybuilding contests, if they were more entertaining, they would do better. So you have to give them props for the idea,
right? Well, and that's what all my podcasts I've been doing recently. They said, Ed, if you could change one thing about the contest nowadays, what would it be? And I would say, go back to having it in a theatrical venue.
You think it makes a huge difference?
Oh yeah,
right?
I mean, we used to put on Gold's Gym used to put on contests, and then they asked us not to do it. And of course, back in the day, there were gym owners putting on contests that would basically.
They weren't sanctioned shows, is what you're saying. So it was an in-house contest.
Well, no, they were sanctioned, but there was a lot of cheating on the judging because they wanted their members to win. So I thought, well, gym owners should never put on contests. But like this picture of Arnold that I showed you. This was at an auditorium in downtown L.A. With Arnold on competing. And it was real theatrics. We could go. When you go into a ballroom, flat seating, with overhead lighting is all uniform, and people are walking around. There's no drama. It's just.
But it's a business. I mean,
it's a business.
I mean, it's a promotion event. I mean, limited ticket sales. Were you at that event when Arnold Litvich was taken? Yeah. What was the aura like with Arnold like that?
It was spectacular. It was he aced the competition.
But was he? How many guys were in that show? Do you remember?
Probably a dozen.
And was Arnold that much of a standout for people? Yeah. What was it about Arnold? What made him so different?
Arnold could, and people have all asked me about this, and I've thought about it. But I mean, I'm old enough to have seen. I'll be 80 in a month. I'm old enough to have seen Arnold on stage with Lou Ferrigno, and you would think, well, yeah, I mean, Lou was 6'4" and 325 pounds. But Arnold, sort of, won in my opinion. He would. Arnold's one of those few people I've seen who could change enormously when he pumped up. Some bodybuilders pump up and never really. And
who do you think's the greatest bodybuilder of all time?
Well, like you, I've said Lee Priest, because of what I knew he was doing and his age when I met him. I mean, I've never met a 20-year-old that looked like Lee. I mean, proportion-wise, if he'd been 2 inches taller, he would have been Mr. Olympia for years. But he was just, short enough in the legs that the proportions weren't quite perfect. But, he had 21.5-inch biceps at 5'3" and 215 pounds.
Can you talk about how you located Lee Priest and talk a little bit about, because I know he turned 20 or 21 when he was at
21 in my
home. Okay, because it was just before I came.
Yeah.
It was kind of a historical time for me because of the timing.
Right.
So he came from Australia. Obviously, he wasn't a pro. Did you find him or did someone else find him?
Actually, Herb Gelb, who
yep.
The photographers were kind of my scouts in the gym, because strange to say, but most of the magazines did not hire their own photographers, or they weren't on staff. They weren't hired help. So these photographers, to get work, would go to scout Gold's Gym Venice and
hang around and see who comes in.
Nowadays, you can get discovered from your home, your bathroom.
Well, yeah, phone. Instagram, yeah.
But back then, you had to go to L.A. to get discovered, get seen. So Herb Gelb brought Lee Priest to my office.
Which was next door. Your office. So the offices were next door to the gym. So when you walk in Gold's Gym, to the left side were Ed's offices, and you guys all had space.
The current one?
The current one. So when you're standing in front, there's like a door. I don't even know if it's still what it is now.
It's not.
Kind of where the pro shop is?
It's on the side, yeah.
Okay.
But so those were his offices that were pretty much locked. I remember knocking on the door, and he'd come over. So he brought him in there, and that's where a lot of the guys came through. I remember Chris Aceto told me, you hired him there and everything. So
I think I was I was at Weider Muscle Camps, which is a great idea.
Yeah.
That's something I think you should investigate, because hotel rooms maybe in Vegas, you could get motels in the summer and get people out here for weight loss and bodybuilding.
Those were packed. And the guy who did the movie, he was a producer at I forget what his name was. He's the one that ran the camps, I think. David Zelon.
Yeah, Dave Zelon.
And he promoted the USA the year I came in '93.
Yeah, he actually ran our shows, our contests.
Okay.
And then I think he's with one of the major studios.
Yeah, I think he's a producer there. Right. He did a couple films.
Yeah, great guy.
So he brought Lee into the office, and what did you think?
I said, "Well, my God, we actually had a dark room and a studio for Chris Lund, who was Weider's main photographer. Chris shot mainly in black and white. Was a brilliant photographer, and so I took Lee down to the studio and took some Polaroids, FedExed them to Joe Weider, and then 2 days later, we were having lunch with Joe in the Valley. And Joe offered him a contract.
At his house or at the office?
We met at the office, and then we went to a local restaurant. So, because Lee was stranded. He was, I called my house, at one point I had 2 or 3 Louiswick refugees in my home.
Louiswick got me into bodybuilding, yeah. So he was supposed to take care of things for him.
Yeah, he was supposed to be most of the guys I've known really did need an agent or a manager. Lou could have actually done a lot of good if he'd been real, but he would always disappear.
So Lee's there, broke, nothing,
broke.
no money.
I don't know whether he was going to go back to us or what was going to happen. Lou had encouraged him to put his plane ticket on his uncle's credit card. And
I did the same for the teen nationals, by the way. My dad paid for it. Yeah. He told me the same thing. I'll reimburse you.
So, yeah, I mean, Lee was phenomenal. I mean, he was in top shape. And it was, again, life is so much about, in my book, one of the messages, life is half about, 50% fate, luck, what you do with it, and then the other half is perseverance. And I've read this in a lot of biographies, but it just so happened that Jim Mannion was in the gym that week. And I approached Jim and I said, this kid is twice Mr. Australia. Why isn't he a pro? And so Mannion called Australian people Federation and got a pro card so that a couple weeks later he could compete in the Ironman and win money, which he did. So,
but you've seen a lot of bodies.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. I mean, I saw Lee, and I always say, Ed, he almost couldn't walk. His legs were so big at the time. And the thing is we talk about a lot of the PED use now. He didn't take anything really.
Yeah, I mean, again,
because he's number one, didn't have the money.
Yeah,
but
he had no money.
The knowledge necessarily wasn't there either.
I remember giving him some things, whatever, but back then it was nothing like it is now.
Yeah.
And I mean, and he had no money. I don't, I would give him money. I'm sure to go to the grocery store, or whatever. And he also rode the bike a lot.
Did his bike get stolen too?
I don't know. I'm not sure, but
he had to be, when he was off season, he had to be close to 300 pounds at
actually,
5 foot.
It's funny you should say that because I would be at the firehouse and I was, there's Lee Priest. And the person I was with would say, that's not Lee Priest.
Yeah.
He was maybe 270 and he loved to eat. And no, I mean, just again, had the 212 class been around, maybe that would have been his key to success. But even then, because Derek Lunsford, who I encouraged, I met 7 or 8 years ago to go for it, got him a contract with Universal at the time. And he's 5'5", and that's the perfect height. Flex Lewis, who I brought to America in 2004, is 5'5". So Lee was just 2 inches short of that, what makes, to me, in my mind, a perfect proportion.
Talk about some of the wrestlers that were bodybuilders, like Ultimate Warrior, Luger, all these guys.
Ultimate Warrior was Jim Hellwig, was somebody I saw. Again, he won the local Gold's Classic in Atlanta, and I invited him out to L.A. to train for the Junior USA's or some national show, and This is early on in the 80s when I really didn't understand that if you're taller than 6'2", it's not that easy to get a pro card or make it in bodybuilding. Arnold's at 6'2" at his height, and that just happens to be the perfect height for a bodybuilder. I think after that it's hard. It's very hard to put on that much muscle. So anyway, Hellwig came out, stayed with me. Came in 6th place or something, didn't do well. Went back to Atlanta to do chiropractic school, and I thought that was the end of it. But then we had formed a Gold's Gym wrestling team with four people, one of whom was Steve Borden, who managed my gym in Northridge. Or at the time, it was in Reseda, and Steve was just 21, and someone had approached him about going into pro wrestling.
And he was Sting.
Yeah. And I said, yeah, go for it. And we had this team of 4 players, 2 big guys and 2 smaller, shorter guys. And the big guy dropped out. It was a bouncer, and I'd met in Santa Barbara. And God knows where he is. I'd love to know. But so I called up Hellwig and I said, we've lost our big guy. Are you interested in wrestling? He said, well, hell, I'm not making any money here. And I said, well, we pay $100 a night. So he came out and became partners with Sting. And they had a rough couple, years wrestling in these minor leagues. I would go with him sometimes, and it was.
Was it just local, or was it actually getting on a plane and going?
Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. Big Papa Pump was one of the guys I got to be friends with.
Scott Steiner
And his brother Rick Steiner, who was an incredible bodybuilder. So it was crazy for a couple years, and then Ted Turner started the WCW, and that's when Sting left the partnership to go wrestle in that league, and then Jim Hellwig stayed in the WWF at the time. They changed their name to World Wrestling Entertainment when the WWF, the World Wildlife Federation, sued them.
Why do you still push a lot of these guys to wrestling versus bodybuilding?
Well, if I meet a tall person, a tall bodybuilder,
like tall, what meaning? What? How high?
6'3" or over, because I know, I think the wrestling world right now needs more believable talent. I think it's terrible right now.
Do you still push a lot of people there?
Well, no, I don't. It's hard for me. I rarely find anybody that works that is 6'3" and a bodybuilder. I mean, just like there are very few good amateur bodybuilders right now in the U.S., there are even fewer people I meet that run into, even on social media, who have the right look. Or if they do, they're not interested.
I know, but like Cena, who's obviously, we talk about him often. He was probably the most known house guest employee. Yeah. He's 6 feet, 6'1".
He's exactly 6 feet.
Okay, so obviously he wanted the body
You're
built.
5'9" and a quarter.
I'm 5'9". Yeah, I'm 5'9". Yeah.
I remember taping you 5'9" and 1/4 inches, and that's a tough height for a bodybuilder, because you're almost, back in the day, you're too short for the heavyweight class and you're too tall for the light heavy. So actually, you won with what I would consider the worst height possibility, because it is tough.
I always thought it was a great height, to be honest.
I always thought 5'9".
Because Phil Heath was 5'9". I mean, Ronnie Coleman was 5'11".
Yeah.
Lee Haney was 5'11". Who else? Dorian Yates was 5'10".
I think he was 5'11". But most of the guys that I would say the average height of the guys that did well was 5'11". Bob Paris, Mike Christian,
Matt Mendenhall.
Frank McGrath is 5'11".
So why did you push Cena to wrestling, or was that his choice?
That was, when I met him, again, this is 1999. He's out on spring break. I saw him working out in the gym, and he had a great face. He looked like Matt Damon with muscles.
Yeah.
And because people say now, Ed, how did you recognize him? What did you see? Well, God, look, he looks like Matt Damon. What give me a break. How easy is that? So I tapped him on the shoulder out in the parking lot after his workout. I wouldn't try not to bother people while they're working out. And I said, "Have you ever thought about professional wrestling?" And he said, "It would be my dream." Those were his exact words. And
I remember when you introduced me to him for the first time, and he was riding a motorcycle at the time. I don't know. He had a motorcycle sitting in. I remember I
bought him
went to
a
gym.
crotch rocket for.
Was it red?
I used one for $3,700.
Was it red?
I think it was yellow.
Oh, okay.
But I rode on the back of it with him, and
No way.
I'd never been so terrified in my life, because I couldn't. How do young kids weigh under 100 pounds, control that beast? Because he was going up a hill and I was like horizontal. Yeah. But yeah, John was had motorcycles as a kid, but I think he had 3 or 4 brothers, and they all played wrestling on Saturday mornings watching WWE.
And so you put it in his head, or he?
No, he said that would be my dream. But he said there's no way I could do it. And I said, well, I could show you how.
And what happened from that space? Because he was on their vacation, so he went back.
I said, go back, graduate from college, come back out. You can stay with me until you get on your feet. And I had a connection with wrestling school. The same guy that trained Sting and Ultimate Warrior agreed to train John. So John came out. He stayed, I think, 5 months in my home. There were like 7 or 8 other house guests that went through at the same time. But he was totally focused. And 18 months later, after I met him, he had a wrestling contract with WWE.
Do you remember the money that was in wrestling at that point when you, was it better? let's talk a little bit about money in bodybuilding, because we always talk about, and I know Matarazzo was like, he moved out, he won the USA. You talked about him making $250,000 a year guest posing. Back then, that was a lot of money.
Well, yeah, my house guests, I mean, these are just some of the hundreds of autographed or signed photos I have. Here's one Jay gave me.
We should take some video of this, and then you can cut it into it.
But back in the day,
hold it up so that camera
back
right
in the
there
day,
so you can see it.
when Jay would be
I was
invited,
23 there, by the way.
Guest posing was a big deal. Jay could go to a contest, and this is like printing money. You could have this made for $1 and sell it to somebody for $10.
Yes,
or 20. So this was, this was nowadays. I think guys are selling T-shirts or hoping that someone will give them some money if they take a selfie with them. But these are just, Joe DeAngelis, Mr. America, Hani Von Aken, Nadia Comaneci, Ben Pekulski. Here's Nasser, Eddie Robinson, one of my favorites.
Yeah, Eddie Robinson was one of the greatest teenage bodybuilders ever.
Yeah. See, he was 5'7", so he was a perfect light heavy. He was 205 in this photo.
He was a WBF guy too.
He was a WBF guy too. Yeah.
And Joe liked him a lot. He kept him on contract for a lot of years.
Joe kept him for. So back then, in fact, that's worth talking about because of Vince McMahon and the WBF, where he paid guys, and we're talking 100 to 200,000 a year. Joe Weider started having to pay people.
Well, what was Joe paying at the time? Not much.
Nothing. Or he would offer people. I remember Matt Mendenhall. He kept Vince McMahon wanted Matt Mendenhall, but Joe kept saying, "Well, stay with me, and I'll give you a free ads in our magazine where you can sell your merchandise." So Matt never went with WBF, which is in a way a little unfortunate, but because of that, Joe started having to pay the guys, $100,000 a year to compete. So that began to change things.
Well, I know Stridham got like $300,000 a year, and at the time in 1989, that is equivalent to today's money. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, Gary worked a good deal for himself at the expense, I think, of the others. But that he was a negotiator.
Who is your favorite house guest?
Well, I get that asked a lot. I guess, of course, Jay. But,
he's got to say Jay, but. I didn't. No.
There's a story that I've always heard.
Okay. Jay would sort of help to train my house guests to make their beds and not put their wet.
The wet towel I left. He yelled at me for. I used to take my towel off and lay it on the bed, and Ed came in and he's like, "You can't leave the wet towels. You need to hang the wet towels up."
Well, there was a sort of an insect that would get into damp moisture down by the beach at the time, which is still an issue. But
first of all, I want you to talk about purchasing that home, the year you bought it, the price you paid, and what it's worth today.
Okay, well, the house that Joe Millionaire stayed in, who was supposedly broke, I bought in 1993 for $1.6 million. I sold it for $3 million. It's now for sale for $8.5 million. So, Lee Priest would sit on the porch and basically act like he owned the place and have some fun with that. But it was 30,000 people would walk by that house on a. It
was on Oceanfront Walk, right there.
Right. It was a couple hundred yards from Muscle Beach or Muscle.
So when I stayed there in July of '93, when did you buy the house?
I bought it in February of '93.
Okay, so it was fairly new because I remember you only had plastic furniture in the kitchen. There was like a plastic table with plastic furniture, and there's a reason behind this. So talk about this.
Well, some of my house guests ended up breaking the furniture. So. But I felt as an architect, well, then it's not the house guest's fault, it's the furniture's fault. So this is back in the day when they're still available. They're great chairs, were those $10 or $12 plastic chairs you'd see at the supermarkets.
Yeah.
And I designed a table, actually had the table made with the Lazy Susan. I love going to Chinese restaurants with the Lazy Susan. So I had one made that would accommodate a half a dozen chairs. In fact, I got to skip now. I was at Jay and Carrie's wedding in Las Vegas, and there were only 11 people in the entire wedding party. And I knew Treasure Island had a Chinese restaurant that sat 12.
Remember, yeah, you took us to our post-wedding dinner.
Because you and Carrie didn't have anything planned. Nope. So
we got married at the Rio Hotel, by the way.
So for wedding cake, we had fortune cookies.
Yes.
That's a story that we've never heard. We've never heard that on this podcast.
I wish we had kept the fortune cookies, the fortune. Pieces.
So back to I've heard a story about Jay and toilet paper.
Oh. Well, Chris Landweeder's photographer asked me what I thought of the new era of bigger bodybuilders, and I said, well, they're giant shitting machines. Yeah. He actually put that in the magazine because somehow back in the day it seemed like the bodybuilders were using one roll every 2 days, and now they're using one a day.
I always hear Jay say the story. Ed said I used the most toilet paper of anybody.
Well, I mean, all there was to do when I stayed at Ed's place was, like, I got that 1 month I came because you invited me back after the 93 encounter we had at Gold's in July. So I came back and you said, come stay with me and get the Gold's Gym experience. And that's what I loved about your invitation. You gave the opportunity. And to be honest, when I went out there after Teen Nationals, I said, I have to do this. But when I went out in November and stayed until just before Christmas, I remember you dropped me off and I was flying home. It was the first time I had been away for a month.
Right.
And I had finished, I was working at a golf course at the time, so I got laid off and I was collecting unemployment. I grew so much in that 1 month. Yeah. All I did was eat, sleep, and train. And you would entertain us. You'd be at work all day. Yeah. And you say, you know what, let's go to dinner. We'd go see a movie on 3rd Street Promenade. And I mean.
But it was a wonder, again, getting back to the era that was magical. This was, again, the 80s and 90s when I'd go to the office at 7 in the morning, come back at 7 after a 12-hour day. And I'd go into the house and, who's hungry, who wants to eat. And, I figured by the time, if I were to go out to a grocery store and buy the food and prepare it and clean up, it was $1,000 meal. Mm-hmm. But back then I could take whoever to dinner for, nothing, relatively speaking. It was very affordable. And we would relax and I would learn about, your take on the gym, what was going on.
And hear about what's happening inside the gym.
Cena says he learned so much from me at those times when we talked. And I've never rented a video. I love the big screen experience. And I think just going to a movie with people and then going back and talking about what you saw, I think that's meaningful conversation.
No cell phones.
Yeah. Well, in fact, the last time I ever took anybody to see a movie was when I moved out to the desert and I had 2 or 3 house guests with me. And we were watching Avatar, and they're on their phones texting people. I said, that's it. No more movies. This is ridiculous.
Do you still enjoy going to the movies, though?
I love movies. Yeah, but
is there anything good anymore?
But there's nothing good anymore. I mean, I've seen Oppenheimer 9 times. That's how, because there was nothing else to see. But I have walked out of more movies in the last year than in my entire life.
I feel the same way. So a lot of stuff is streaming now on Amazon or Netflix.
Too much CGI. It's just stupid. I just saw the movie 17. What is it? It's got someone's name in 17 after it. It just came out. Terrible. I walked out of that.
Do you feel like today everyone had an Arnold dream?
Yeah.
And they wanted to be the next, right? Ferrigno became the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
I mean, all these.
Yeah.
We haven't seen any action stars. I mean, when you think about like Van Damme, who trained at your gym, or still does, training at Gold's, but was there anyone you saw that potentially could be the next Arnold?
Colin Von Moger.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
I mean, I invited him for wrestling tryouts, and he made it. I mean, that's not just because I see somebody big and send him to Orlando for tryouts doesn't mean he's going to be a wrestler. I would say only one out of 3 or 4 make it. They offered him a contract. He didn't even call me to say, Ed, I'm going to turn it down.
But why didn't you push him to film? Because I feel like
they would have. Because if he'd gone with it, he'd be in movies by now. Go look at Cena is in movies. The Rock, Dave Bautista.
Yeah.
Dave, I think I think Dave's probably the best actor of all 3. So I mean, he would have been a natural. He's one of the few people I've met besides say Roland Kickinger and one other person who looked like a young
What
Arnold.
about Gunther?
Gunther tried. He took lessons. He took fighting lessons and sword fighting, whatever. He was in a few movies.
And a lot of these directors or people like the talent scouts would come to the gym. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, back in the day, again, we tried. We actually had a company called Gold's Gym Motion Picture Entertainment Division. You for $100 a month or whatever it was, we would put your name on file, and if a studio would call or an ad agent, whatever, we would try and get you work. So we got hundreds of members work. You know, they still getting, some are still getting residuals like Rick Valenti. But where was I going with this? So
they were part of the membership.
American Gladiators and the other show.
They cast the people from the gym.
They told me that they had hired 3 agencies to find people for their show. They found no one. They come to Gold's Gym on a Saturday. In the space of 3 or 4 hours, they found all their talent.
Mike O'Hearn.
Half of whom had been house guests. I'm the one that encouraged Mike O'Hearn to move to L.A.
From Seattle.
I saw him in my gym in Seattle. I was partners with Jack and
what'd you think when you saw him for the first time? Did you ask him if he was natty?
I said, no. I said, you belong in L.A. Yeah.
He's still natty.
Yeah. I said,
how big was he when you saw him?
He was big. He was
like, he was more bulky then, wasn't he? He wasn't like the lean guy he is now.
He was.
Is he the most incredible looking 50? What was he now? 57 or 8?
Got to be in his 50s.
55, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
He looks great for 55. He's remarkable.
And you got him out there. I remember he was driving a big Jeep with big tires on. He's a personal trainer. Yeah. What about Jeep Swanson? How did he get into the films?
Well, actually, that's a story that's in my book.
Because he was in Batman.
Yeah. Actually, the director of that movie contacted Lee about being in it. But then when he cast a female actress who played Poison Ivy, who was tall, so Lee was out.
Yeah,
and that's
too
when
short.
Jeep Swanson got the job. Now, Jeep...
How big was he at that point? Do you remember?
Jeep might have been over 400.
And there weren't a lot of big dudes like that at that point.
There still isn't.
I know.
In fact, tragically, if Jeep gave up on L.A. at some point and went back to Texas to wrestle, and I couldn't find him. There were no cell phones back then. And he was the one I was going to call first, but I couldn't reach him, so I called Jim Hellwig in Atlanta. So fate. If cell phones had existed, or if Jeep had stayed 2 more weeks in L.A., and Jeep was a wonderful human being. I mean, I was there when he died at UCLA Medical Center. He came back to Venice, but it was too late for the movie. He actually came back. He died, I think, without ever seeing the premiere. But the timing was just not great.
And Andy Berninski, he came out. Was he one of your guests?
He was never a house guest, but he came to me for advice, and I forget how tall he is, but he said, Ed, I'm told you're the guy to talk to about bodybuilding, wrestling, and acting. And I said, well, you're too tall to be a bodybuilder. Why don't you try acting? And this is back in the day when the Barbarian Brothers were working some clubs on Sunset, and Andy went there to work. And he had he'd gotten in a fight and had a tooth knockout, and some TV producer or some movie producer saw him working the club, security, and said, "You'd be perfect for my movie," and hired him.
He acted in a lot of films.
He was in quite a few.
I remember.
He's a program Hudson Hawk. He was in Higher Learning, everything.
And he was like a main guy too, not just a fill-in.
He was to me a talent. It's like, Cena, whoever. I mean, they're all seem to be, natural actors. He was. I'm still in touch with him. But yeah, he's. He made a significant number of movies.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
He was Leatherface. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, he was in that rare group, but. It's so you don't see, well, the average American male is your height.
Did you expect Cena to go as far as he did? Like, you have all these people that stay with you.
Right.
I mean, just mentioned Calvin Von Moger, which might have been, you always say he might have been the biggest disappointment for you because you felt like he had the potential.
Yeah.
Like, is there anyone that you thought they've gone a lot further than your expectations?
Well, Cena definitely, yeah. But he was the most determined. He was machine-like. I mean, he was. I can't.
Is his work ethic just
incredible
that much
work
further?
Ethic, yeah. Yeah. That's so. I saw that, but I mean, you know, to me, I mean, seeing him in the Marine and for the first time, you know, that just was amazing to me. And he's now, I think he's in Budapest right now making a.
Yeah, he is. He's at Flex Gym. He's at Adam's Gym. I saw it over there.
So, I mean, obviously, that's incredible. You know, it's wonderful to see.
And talk about California was you had to go to California. I feel like my success, if I didn't travel to California and compete in the Tournament of Champions in '95, and then come out there for the photo shoots time and time again, who Irvin obviously shot a lot of that. Yeah. What could I have had the same opportunity being in Massachusetts? Because you came to my house, and you know I never forget what you told me.
I remember chickens running.
Yes, he said, "Oh gosh, I need to get you out of here." That's what he said, because he pulled up and he got out of the car and the guinea hens were attacking his car. He had a rental car. And he came to my little apartment downstairs, and you looked around, and you're like,
it was underground, right?
Yeah, it was like a duplex. Yeah, so it was like a bottom floor, and I was staying down there.
Well, that's and I think that's in my book. But I would encourage people to move to a big city.
I know, but why would you take people and put them in your home? Because like, we love our privacy.
Yeah.
And you say you're working 12 hours a day, and you want to come home to a bunch of guys that are laying around on your couch and watching
First
TV.
Off, I'm afraid of the dark.
Okay.
I've been robbed before I had my home there. I'd been robbed 3 times in L.A. My home had been broken into. As a kid, my parents still talk about it when they were alive, when I was with them out in the desert, that I would run up the stairs at night. When I have to turn out the lights, I was afraid of the boogeyman. And so honestly, nothing is more terrifying to me than going to an empty house. And then, you know, I'm a social animal. I mean, I go to happy hours now and start talking to people at the bar trying to sell my book. But, you know, I like people. I'm not a loner. And, no, it was wonder. You know, you can imagine going out to dinner with 2 or 3 guys, and, you know, it was a freak show to some, but it was great fun.
Like Jimmy Quinn was massive, right? I mean, is there people that you had some really great times being around?
Yeah,
they were just outlandish characters.
Jimmy had been a New York bouncer, and so he had all these quick, you know, one-liners, and so I would have so much fun going out with him, and or Mike Matarazzo, because they would show it. I mean, that's my problem with so many of the podcasts I see. These guys don't understand. You know, this is what people want to see, muscle. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Jimmy Quinn would wear, you know, a tank top that was tied in a knot in front, and you'd kind of wonder, well, why even bother wearing a shirt?
Because it was like a half shirt, right?
Exactly.
The 80s.
But you know what's funny? Louis Colomb, who was one of your house guests, unfortunately he passed, but he took care of me when I was there. Yeah. And he wasn't a guy that was like a great bodybuilder. He just was had a good look, right?
He had a great look. He looked like a Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yes, but he idolized the guy for the Dutchman, Barry DeMay. He always liked his physique, which he was more aesthetic.
Barry was my second foreign house guest. I don't know how I found him.
Him and his brother were in L.A. at one time.
And that's a good example where, you know, I just saw Jorgen DeMay the other day. So not only was our response, getting back to one of your first questions, was there are obviously 3 people in my lives in terms of house guests, people who I know for sure if I had never met them, they wouldn't have the career they've had, or people I'm not sure about. And then there's people who I know would probably made it anyway. And you were in that category, but you've said, well, thanks to you, the second invite, I pursued bodybuilding, not.
You'll learn some things on this podcast about how I feel about the situation.
Yeah. So there were 3 categories, but like, you know, if I never brought Matarazzo out or Jimmy Quinn or Cena, there would be no John.
Did Paul DeMeo come through you also?
Yeah. Oh yeah, he stayed. Yeah, in fact, that's a good example of that small town mentality that I hate, where Mike Matarazzo came out first, again another lose weight refugee, and I discovered. Actually, came into my office and I said, you know, you don't need to wear shoulder pads to come into my office. He said, I'm not wearing any.
He was pretty wide, right?
So, yeah. So I said, take off your shirt. And of course, I taped his arms or whatever.
How big were they, you remember?
21, I'm sure. So he said, well, you better talk to my parents. And he had the most loving parents I've ever met. And I flew back to Boston to convince his mom and dad to let him come out. And I said, if your son stays with me, he'll win the contest and be making $300,000 a year, which he did for 8 of the 9 years. And sure, and his dad said, well, if that's the case, he can go. And he came out and stayed with me. And he was a lot of fun. He was Italian, very outspoken. So he was one of my favorites because we'd have a lot of fun going to dinner and a movie.
You know, it's funny because Louis told me Jim Quinn would walk around and wait for people. If people didn't react, he got so mad because he wanted people to freak out when he walked in because he was so imposing. I mean, he was, how much did he weigh? 300 pounds?
300 wasn't a thing back then. It was,
that's right. Yeah, now it is. Everyone's 300.
300, yeah.
It was more like 285.
Yeah. But he was lean.
He was lean, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Now, I tell the guys it's not bowling. There's nothing magic about 300.
So let me ask you this. You bought property around the oceanfront walk home. You bought where Flex Wheeler lived. You had other places. Yeah. Why did you buy these other properties other than investment? Did you just not want to put people out? Because you seem to have all bodybuilders living there, and were they living rent-free at the time?
Actually, I bought my first home was on Paloma, which again had hundreds of people there, but it was 2 blocks from the gym. My second home was on Wavecrest, which was 2 houses down from the original Gold's Gym, and that was a duplex which I bought with Flex Wheeler. Flex pulled up one day in a leased Mercedes. I said, Flex, do you even own a house? He said, no. And he said, I don't know how. And I said, well, let me show you. So actually, I bought that condo with him, and then right after that, I bought the beach house.
Was real estate like a big thing for you, or was Venice cheap then? Because now it's pretty outrageous.
Well, I wish I hadn't been so busy and focused more on that, because ironically, I would have made more money with my 3 homes than what I made selling the gym. That's California real estate.
Who would have thought, though? Because when you put Gold's Gym on that, what's the name of the street? Hampton. It was like really bad. It was gang central.
I say in my book, it had the highest murder rate of any zip code in America.
Why would you put a gym there?
Because I wanted to bring it back to Venice, and it was the only space available. There's not a lot of commercial.
Bigger space.
I was working for Charles Eames, a very famous designer, architect. You've seen the Eames chair, about incredible furniture designer. I was working 2 blocks down the street on Brooks and Abbott Kinney, and I saw the space for lease.
Was there a sign out there one day? Or
yeah.
Okay,
it was a 4-bay warehouse, and the first bay was available, never been rented. This is 1981, so I took a gamble and said, let's move the gym back to Venice, and it was 9,100 square feet.
And this was the guy who owned it that murdered whatever got.
No, actually, the guy that the actor who murdered his wife allegedly owned the one in Santa Monica, and he and his attorney were jerks, so they were going to raise our rent. The actor trained at Vince Gironda's gym in the Valley, and I think he wanted to kind of stick it to us. So
you found that location, and did it clean up the area after that? And then obviously the real estate picked up. And
our members cleaned. We cleaned up Venice. It was actually 3 or 4 years after we moved down there that even the firehouse opened up. That's how bad. There were no restaurants down there. You could pick up a hooker on Main Street any night of the week. I remember the first time. I finally got my BMW, which back in the day they had Blaupunks. My radio was stolen 6 times in that area. That was that bad. They were stealing Blaupunks. But the first time we caught somebody, I called the police, and they said, "Well, can't you take care of him? Aren't you Gold's Gym?" So I just told the members, I said, let's send him a message.
So they shook him up a little bit.
We never had a problem.
Yeah.
Even after the Rodney King murders, when
It's mafia stuff here, muscle mafia.
even back when the supposedly the rioters were coming towards Venice, the water, they bypassed us. I was on the roof with a rifle, but nobody touched it.
Really?
We were closed. Yeah.
I got kind of like a deep question. So you've helped a lot of people in a very selfless way.
Right.
Have you, what I call paying forward?
Right.
Have you stayed in contact with any of these, with a lot of the guys to see if they've also done the same for other people?
Actually, some have. I've talked to them. And again, you talk about, part of the reason I did what I did was you look at the magazines. Again, there was no social media. The magazines were the social media of the day. We got all that free publicity because of my house guests or people that came to the Mecca and got shot there. If you picked up an average Flex magazine or Muscle Fitness back in the day and paged through it, you would see dozens of photos, some full page. I wish I had brought some magazines with that, showing that. You can see them on my Instagram account, Gym Architect, where Weider would give us a full page photo of a guy like Marcus Rule wearing a Gold's Gym T-shirt or tank top. We paid nothing. That would have cost $35,000.
Free.
But it was free. So, and after a while, they got smart and began airbrushing out our name. So that's when we painted the stripe over the mirror. So you could not take a picture in Gold's Gym without knowing where you are, and it's still true today. I don't know why more gym owners or why Gold's corporate.
So branding is everything.
Branding is everything. I don't know why more people don't do that.
Hence that's why the sign is here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I picked the same color. I picked red, yellow, black, white. They worked for Hitler for a while. They worked for McDonald's. Colors. Branding is important. Graphics are important.
Absolutely.
I designed that cover. I'm very proud of it.
Talk about the Barbarian Brothers.
Well, I remember.
There's a couple of guys called the Trend Twins now that are very like the modern day Barbarian Brothers. But talk about were they characters? Were they bodybuilders? What were
characters? And again,
they came from Connecticut, I think.
Yeah.
Those guys.
They walked in. I remember the day they walked. I happened to be down there in Santa Monica. They walked in. We were still back on 2nd Street. They walked into the gym and they were dressed in the lumberjack shirts and the bib overalls and boots, and they were two twins. They were huge.
Did they have the hair then too?
Yeah, they had long hair. They were both, I think, say 6'1" or 2, probably in the 260s, and they said, we're the Barbarian Brothers, and they didn't have money for a membership, I think, and so we gave them a membership. I even remember we had Gold's Gym stenciled on their lumberjack shirts, and they became characters. They were when we sold in '99 the first time. I know David came up to me and said they want us to pay, and I said, well, maybe after 20 years it's time to pay, because I had no control over that. I couldn't.
Were they as strong as they advertised in the books?
Yeah, they were. They were sloppy.
And how did they get in the movies and do DC Cab and all that?
Come to the gym. They promoted themselves. They were very good promoting themselves. You can, and I quote them in my book. Some things they told the L.A. Times interviewer, but they said, we're stronger than Arnold. We're better looking, and they were aggressive. And they both, at some point in their lives, they both had homes in Malibu, so we're probably worth millions. They were just shows that if you have a dream, you dare to dream, you might, it all might happen.
Do you know about the Lyle Zato fight when they got into a fight?
Yeah.
Did he really beat both of them up at the same time?
I don't know about that. I do know that he had let them stay at their house and they erected, which I could believe, having been to their houses or their apartments.
Was Lyle Zato an animal? Was he
just?
I heard he was just.
He told me, Ed, he said he considered himself like the gym mascot. He said, Ed, there's nobody here I can't beat up. So
the ultimate.
I heard a lot of stories. No, I heard a lot of stories about Lyle.
Imagine I was there the day that he brought Howie Long. I had to approve. The front counter staff would call me over if to approve a guest pass or a free membership, and so I had to come over, and Lyle Ozeta was there with Howie Long. And Howie was one of these big Boston brawlers. He really wasn't a bodybuilder.
He was actually from Marlboro, Mass,
Yeah.
very close to where I grew up.
And
Or Milford, maybe.
So, of course, Ed Connors goes, God, you got a great look. If you work on that body, you might amount to something, maybe in Hollywood. And if Lyle Ozale hadn't been there to say, cool it, he would have probably killed me. But I would say things to the people because and sure enough, he made movies and he's doing.
You were a pretty blunt guy. I mean, you were very honest.
He was playing in the league at that time. He was one of the best defensive ends. Yeah.
But he did go on to.
He did. Yeah, he was in movies.
And now he's doing
commentary.
Yeah. But I think that's what people liked about me is I wouldn't bullshit some. I wouldn't go up to him and say you can be Mr. Olympia if I didn't believe it. I would never lie to somebody, and that's kind of why I stayed undercover for quite a few years, because I began getting people would send me tapes or pictures of themselves, and it would be like somebody on The Voice or American's Got Talent, and you think, my God, what microphone are they speaking into that they think they can sing? Because people would send me. I wish I'd kept some because it's almost sad, but I wouldn't want to hurt someone's feelings. I wouldn't want to be cruel, but I wouldn't want to lie to them and say, yeah, you could make it, if I didn't believe it.
You always gave people opportunity, though, Ed.
Yeah.
And I mean, did he answer your question about back?
Was there anyone that you stayed in contact with that you've seen that they've done the same thing? Like,
well, I was with
people.
Daniel Pewter this past week at a conference in Beverly Hills. Daniel was somebody that I helped get into pro wrestling. He won the Tough Enough. He beat out 2,000 people on Venice Beach. He then went on to mixed martial arts. He now he started a chain of schools where the 25% of Americans who drop out of high school. And he's got I don't know how many, couple dozen schools in 3 or 4 states, some with sponsors like Mike Tyson. So he's giving back. And
I just love hearing when someone has had something done good for them,
right,
for them to do the same in return and keep it going.
Look at John Cena and Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Yeah,
I think he's given, and I've talked to people for whom he's made that dream come true.
I met a lot of when we were at your lifetime achievement thing at Gold's. You were a lot of people that talked about the relationship like they were maybe their dreams of being a bodybuilder that became successful gym owners. I mean, that opened up a bunch of different gyms.
In my book, at the end here, I list the 537 house guests. I've updated.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So, pro bodybuilders, 102 became pro bodybuilders, 21 became pro wrestlers, 71 were gym owners. And some of the bodybuilders like Jerry McCall, who you'll probably meet tomorrow at the trade show, he just sold his house for over $6 million. And he owned 2% of my gym in San Jose. He went on to own 6 Gold's gyms. So some of the most successful guys that I encouraged got into the supplement. I mean, 26 got into the supplement business. I figured conservatively that together they did $1 billion last year in supplement sales. And then 65 are dead. So,
but Gerard Dente was one of your house guests too.
Wow, yeah.
MHP,
MHP and muscle.
I think he and Gaspari probably did $100 million a year at their peak. So, if I add all those up together, it's probably $1 billion. And they, I think I'm told they had competing Ferraris at one point, dueling Ferraris.
That's an East Coast thing.
Whose Lamborghini is that outside?
He has so many cars. He has 2 cars sitting outside.
No, it's surprising. I'm thrilled with all that got into the gym business.
What about the scope of what you see now in the talent pool? Do you still travel to like Olympias and Arnold's, or is it not that enticing for you? You talk about Europe. I see you a lot. Like you'll be at FIBO. We're both going to be there.
I run into him randomly in Spain.
All over. I mean, you came to you were at Fit Expo.
Right.
What do you think Joe Weider would think if he saw all this now? Like the vision of bodybuilding Now having the new divisions,
you'd have to be to some degree proud. Like when you go to FIBO, I mean, if Gold's Gym, Arnold, and Weider had never existed, there wouldn't be 200,000 people over 4 days.
You think that's the biggest trade show by far?
It is right now. The Saudis and the Dubai people are trying to top it. But see, that's creating that more. I mean, bodybuilding is more alive, I think, there than here.
It is, yeah.
Sure.
Competitive bodybuilding.
For sure.
So for me, it's kind of fun. And when I go to these events, I'm seeing people I either only see once a year or I haven't seen in 10, 20 years. And that's fun. Like I'm going to see Christer Eriksson, a Swedish bodybuilder I haven't seen in 40 years at FIBO. He'll be there. A German bodybuilder.
I know, but do you think we're going to see major? I mean, we're seeing the Dubai Pro Show, which is the prize money is going up every year, but is that a place that it's like a Mecca for bodybuilders? You know, they've been talking about moving to Kuwait. Like, there's no Mecca anymore that people have to be at? Do you feel like they have to be in one place?
No.
Is that because of social media, or is California just not the opportunity anymore?
I think, LA is. I'm disgusted with the leaders in California, the governor, the mayor, the way they handled the fires, the way they handled the pandemic. No, it's. They killed not only the gym business, how they handled COVID, but they killed, movie theaters, restaurants. God knows our school kids are going to be retarded. The ones that were in school during that period, or they're going to be set back because of the way. Only Sweden got it right. I'm really angry about it, and when I see someone wearing a mask now, I say, that's an offense to me, because they bought into this ridiculous way it was handled. I mean, mask did nothing.
Yeah, I
wore a mask out of courtesy, but with my gray hair, white hair, people would actually go across the street to avoid passing by me. But I grew up in the era of AIDS. That was serious. 35 million people worldwide have died from AIDS. Only 7 million died from COVID in a population of 8 billion. How much of a businessman you have to be to know that that's insignificant? It's a thousandth of 1%. It wasn't, gym owners lost millions. I could tell you numbers.
I think every industry, people just got crushed.
Yeah. Movie theaters are empty now. Restaurants have.
It changed the whole everything. And like you said, the inflation since then, and we talk about the money printed.
They printed, what was it? 70% of Americans' currency in 1 year.
Yeah.
And they wonder why we have inflation. And if the currency's just been destroyed.
We're getting kind of a chain reaction. I'm not very optimistic about the economy because, gym owners, landlords now want full rent, but the gyms aren't at full capacity again. What I talked about earlier, the baby boomers aren't coming back in the same number. So the gyms are hurting. The big box gyms are 24-hour LA Fitness, Gold's gyms. They're now subleasing space for other things, like Lifetime and 24-hour. I've started these regenerative medicine clinics, longevity clinics, which I think is the future of gyms. I think gyms should get into that. And that's one reason I'm here, is to meet with half a dozen people. They think, well, Ed, you franchise gyms, maybe you could franchise longevity clinics in gyms. Because wouldn't that be great if every American, like a bodybuilder, got blood tested twice a year, every 6 months, right?
Jay launched a TRT clinic 6 weeks ago.
TRTkingdom.com.
We were just on even calls every
I
day.
have a clinic now.
You've seen Michael Hearns, of course, yeah. That's a great. We should talk about that, because now that's who knows.
It's the future.
Yeah, the future
for sure.
Because the gyms could help replace the failing of our healthcare system with going that one step further. Mm-hmm. I got blood tested. One of the gym owners I know that has a center in his gym, and I get shipped every month a selection of supplements based on my blood tests. Mm-hmm. And that's a great way to make it sustainable. But you don't need to pay $500 to a doctor to get a blood test, and then he has no time to tell you what the results are.
We literally just talked about this. You can go online, book it. Yeah. They'll come to your house and pull your blood, and a day or two later, you'll have the results.
Well, now to even avoid that issue of pricking you with a needle, I'm going to meet with people tomorrow or Friday who now you can use a breathalyzer or a swab to
Swab.
do the same thing, and that's going to change everything because it's that drawing blood that was the handicap. It was the what's the word? The hurdle.
Yeah, people don't want to do it.
Yeah, well, or it's got to be controlled. It's got to be, but they'll get tattoos, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. You got all bruised up.
Yeah.
Jay, your forms are still looking pretty damn incredible.
Still training, man. I'm still, you mentored me well. I mean, you kept me motivated and, pushing to be, who I was. So,
and I can say all the times we've traveled around, whenever he does interviews, whenever he always brings up your name. Always.
I appreciate that. I think, again, push my book because people need to know the history. I mean, if you're in the gym business or you're a trainer, I think you need to see where it's going.
We'll put a link in the bottom of this.
So do you think that, you talk about the book, do you think this could become some sort of a documentary,
Not a documentary. I think it would be better. Right now, the people I'm talking to in L.A. want to do a Netflix series where, I don't know if you've seen, J.D. Vance, our current vice president, wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy, which is a good read. I read a lot of biographies in writing my own, and it was turned into a Netflix movie. And his story is quite amazing because he came, like so many of my house guests, he was raised by his grandmother and his parents were on crack or whatever. But I think, I imagine this where my home was this, in the gym, has this core group of, ensemble cast of half a dozen people. And every week there's a new episode with someone who comes out to the Mecca to pursue a dream, like you, or Ultimate Warrior, or John Cena. I could see this being an endless amount of stories of people, and the message would be a very positive one about you've got to move, you got to dare to dream, you got to work hard.
Do you still encourage people to bodybuild?
Not unless they're spectacular.
I know, but where do you see... The money isn't in the contracts anymore. Now we're in a social media world. And if someone says to you, I want to be a social media influencer, has anyone ever said that to you?
Yeah.
Like the younger guys, they say, hey, do you know this person? You probably don't know any of the popular social media. Like Calvin Von Moger or Chris Bumstead were they were bodybuilders that became social media influencers. That's kind of the thing now. I feel like we talk about this all the time. You have to almost be a hybrid. So you have to have the great bodybuilding skill and the work ethic, but you also have the work ethic to promote content also, because Instagram, YouTube, I'm going to throw out Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, if you're not on these platforms, you're losing big money because brand deals are important now.
Right.
Is that something that you're seeing with this younger generation? Like, you see these kids... Do you see kids do you see the 18, 19, 20-year-olds getting into it like you saw back in the day, like the Eddie Robinsons and the Rich Gasparis and the Shane DeMoras and all those people?
No, I don't. And I think that's part of that is the social media that somehow a lot of what I see basically says you've got to pay your dues. You've got to be in your 30s. Well, you read in my book, I would rarely encourage anybody over 30 because that's when you start getting hurt. And all my house guests were pretty much in their 20s. The only big exception was Paulo Almeida, but he started late. He started in his early 30s. So he hadn't been training for 10 or 15 years, which is when you begin to, tear things.
Do you know who he is? I remember 5%. He was with because even Rich Piana was a house guest, correct? Or you encouraged him a lot.
He was actually one of my favorites because he was fun. I mean, that's the problem I see. So many of the guys now, the big pros, besides not being able to speak English, they have no personality.
Zero personality.
Chris Lund said it, so put it to beautiful. He said, there are so many big guys now, but there's so many big jerks.
Yep.
And besides using a roll of toilet paper a day, but
you're completely full. You're completely full of shit.
Rich, Jay, you saw it when you went to FIBO.
He was unbelievable with the fans.
That was great.
When did he pee? I mean. He would work that booth 8 hours or more longer, and he was dressed to impress.
What do you think about all the tattoos and the big blown up body parts and all that?
Personally, I don't like it, but I mean, it worked for him.
That was his persona.
Yeah.
Did you like tattoos in bodybuilding?
No, in fact, I mean, Barry DeMay was the first bodybuilder to have a tattoo. It was, I think, a rose on his delt. But
Did you tell these guys don't go get it? Because you used to say to the guys,
yeah.
you never wanted the guys training in a sweatshirt in the gym. Explain to me why.
Well, I wanted, they could get discovered if they, and that's why I see these guys on their podcasts. Don't you realize it's your body that people want to see? You look good. Like,
so I'm wearing a big
Yeah.
shirt, so I shouldn't be wearing a shirt.
no,
but
you're
That's a
showing,
medium.
But you're still, still dressed right.
still get some arms. Yeah.
I've had these conversations with a lot of guys when we travel
Yeah.
and they're covered up, and I'd say, listen, you're a professional bodybuilder. People want to stand next to you and compare themselves so they can show others. If you're covered up,
Well, take your picture with get up and fly like Rich Piana did, and that builds his base all over the
of course,
world.
Jay still does that. He still flexes with
You
everybody.
see these guys, the pro sitting at his booth. He's all covered up. He's been, he doesn't even get up. He's just signing. Back in the day, just signing pictures or whatever. So no, it's realize where your market is.
So you encouraged them to wear a tank top in the gym. You gave them clothes. I mean,
Yeah.
you gave me a bunch of clothes when I was there. And obviously people would come in, like you said, they had the photographers roaming around the gym, and they would say, I want to shoot
In
you.
my book, I list 24 photographers. Imagine them, probably half a dozen. And you would go in the gym, and it would be, we had 4 rooms, basically. People thought the gym was bigger than it really was because it was divided up. But in 3 of the rooms, you would often see 3 photo shoots going on, right, Jay? It was like a 3-ring circus.
Which now, I mean, they charge for that a lot, obviously. But so when you had Gold's Gym, did they give you equipment for the gym, like the brands, to showcase them?
Suddenly, I mean, this is again kind of show how thick-headed the equipment companies are. We convince them that give us your equipment. It's going to be photographed with bodybuilders on it or women, and it'll be seen in the magazines for free. And I think we made Hammer Strength what it was because
I remember it was yellow the first set in the gym.
So ultimately, we paid for none of that equipment. It was
so they would come in and change it out every. Was there a timeline that they would keep, or unless
it was
they?
All up to them, and we rejected some equipment too.
Well, let me ask you a question, because you had yellow and blue equipment there at one point. Then it was red, and then it's black.
Yeah.
How did you decide? When you have certain colors on the walls, that band on the wall, did you pick and choose, or was it up to them to?
It was up to them.
So it stood out so much when you had the yellow and blue in their Hammer Strength.
It didn't matter because, in fact, I mean, back when Pete, Tim, and I bought the gym, it was all black. A lot of it was solid steel stock. So, to me, it looked intimidating. So I said, well, we got to make it look friendlier. So I actually asked the owners of Flex and Carrying Equipment, could you paint the equipment white? Because my dad, who was a surgeon, I saw in his office white equipment. I said, well, that looks friendly.
Yeah, Mark Nally comes here often.
Yeah.
He's a good friend of ours. So Flex Equipment.
Shame about Dan.
Yes.
But tell Mark hi when you see him. But,
of course.
So he can tell you the story. But so then I said, well, why don't we go blue, green, yellow? We went the whole spectrum. And somehow the gym itself was powerful enough, big space. It didn't matter that we had all these colors. You would think, well, that's not, how could that possibly be aesthetically pleasing? But it added to I think to the excitement.
And how did you get the women into the gym, Ed?
We Jane Fonda was a member of our gym, and she was doing.
Do you remember the year?
1981.
Okay.
And she started her own aerobics studio because there was no place for women to exercise in Beverly Hills, and eventually she was going to franchise it, and I said, you really just should do the video and not deal with franchising that market. Well, then a lot of aerobic studios started copying her, but it's a tough business. It's a real people business. So when it didn't do well, we thought that'd be a way to get women into the gym, is to open an aerobic studio.
So that was in the back, the aerobic studio.
It was in the second room, and ultimately it was.
You moved to now. It still exists. Still there.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Room. So that helped bring a lot of women into the gym. Some of my gyms I was involved with, like in Santa Barbara, the majority of them, like 52%, was female, but Venice was never reached that. It was mostly male. But
and how did the males accept the women starting to roll in
Well, that
to
was-
actually get into
yeah.
weight training?
Actually, we never had.
Did you have co-ed bathrooms at the time?
Yeah,
Okay.
we Gold Gym, Gold Gym Santa Monica did not when we bought it. Well, kind of, I mean, but nothing really to speak of. But so when we moved the gym to Venice, that was another reason to move it, to build out men and women's locker rooms. Tim would be better at telling you some of the stories about the women trying to shower in the original Gold's Gym.
And the men would come in and.
Yeah, but the men were men,
And what about throwing people out?
that was my job.
Do you remember you had to throw a lot of people
Not
out
very
or not
many.
so much?
No,
I know, but you're not a rugged guy. So how do you actually?
well, people respected me. I think, like Craig Titus, he holds the record. I had to throw him out 3 times, but the last time or suspended.
Who would have thought? Craig.
Three of my house guests probably murdered people. So, with
We don't talk about that in the book, though, or anything, right?
yeah,
Okay.
But so Craig. I would tell them. I said, I'm going to suspend you for a month or 2. I said, I understand your beef. It was legitimate, but you can't do it in the gym. You can do it outside the gym, like.
I know Arnie List was one, and Melvin Anthony was another one. Confrontation he got into.
Yeah.
And Arnie worked for you at one point.
And Victor Richards
Did he shoot the gun in the gym?
in the Northridge Club, according to my managing partner. So see once, I mean that is such a violent action that imagine if people, he doesn't understand that he was thrown out of 3 of my gyms that I was involved with personally without me knowing about it, or those managers knowing that the other one had done the same thing.
Was it a fighting thing, or
It was always, he would basically approach a female in the gym and basically, without caring whether she had a boyfriend or a husband, and then get into confrontation with her spouse or boyfriend who was there. But he did this in the Northridge gym, which John Lloyd was Boston Lloyd's dad, was the
that's right, yeah.
partner in that. A really sad story. But so you can imagine, as a business person, people should understand this, that if say that later on after that incident, Victor would really to hurt somebody or shoot somebody, we had prior knowledge. We knew that he was trouble. So if you have if you're in the gym and you hit somebody, or staff or whatever, that's a one-time occurrence. But if it happens again, you have history, you have knowledge, and so you could be sued. So once somebody like Victor had done this 3 times in a violent manner.
I heard though he denied the firing of the gun shot because he didn't fire at anyone.
I don't think John. I mean, it was lodged in the cash register, the bullet. I don't think John would make that out. John is as straight as they come, as a no nonsense kind of guy.
Did you have a good relationship with Victor Richards?
No, I mean because of that.
Did you have to personally push him out, or did someone else?
My manager did it. I didn't.
Because he's a big. I mean, he's
Yeah.
a big dude.
He didn't. My manager must have done it.
Was he the biggest bodybuilder of all time, like muscle wise? I know we talked about Lee Priest, but he was gigantic when I saw him for the first time.
I wouldn't say that. No, I mean,
Did Hulk Hogan really have 24-inch pythons?
and he was, and he wasn't. Well, he was 6'5".
What was the real biggest arm that you taped that, like,
Actually,
pound for pound would be impressive?
3 people. Marco Savolainen.
Yes, he had big arms, Finland guy.
It's like I call it the alien bicep in my book, because just when you think you've seen the peak, and thanks to YouTube, you can go on Google, or you go on YouTube and type in Marco Savolainen, 23 and 5/8 inch bicep, which is what Rich Piana's was and Paulo Almeida's. And Paulo had beautiful rounded biceps, and Rich's were very flat. Obviously, they weren't.
Were they real, or?
Obviously, there were things in there,
But like, what about Manfred Hobel?
I remember Manfred.
Remember him?
Yeah.
I don't remember what they taped, but I don't think it was that big. 20 inches is a huge hurdle. I mean, very, very few guys, they're always 19. They're never 20.
It's amazing, though, that you tape these body parts because it's so irrelevant.
Well, it is in a way, but like when I met Evan Senapani, I met Evan at Olympia, Expo, and I said, you compete? And he says, no, I'm not big enough. And I said, well, let me show you. And I taped him. And his measurements are in the book. And after I did that, and I said, I'll fly you to watch the Nationals this year in Atlanta. You tell me what you think. And after that, he said, Ed, you're right. I'm big enough. And
he's from Connecticut also. He wasn't far from me.
2 years later, he became a pro. And he's had a supplement contract for the last 20 years.
Sure has, yeah. He's done a lot of great things. He's a great individual. Yeah.
Nice guy. So, no, he had to, because people haven't taped themselves. And when I said, well, your arms are 20 inches. There's the pros on stage who you think are superhuman, they're 21 inches at most, probably.
How did you align with Joe Weider? Talk a little bit about Joe Weider and his personality. And
well, Joe was a character.
You got a good imitation of his voice, too.
It's not that great, maybe, especially now. But oh, Ed, I hear you're an architect. Can you help me?
He was such a great. He was a great mentor to me.
Yeah, but he pulled our ad in the Weider magazines. I think his staff told him, "You're giving these guys too much press, or whatever. You're helping them too much. You're making money." And so Pete went out there to talk to Joe, and the conversation didn't go well. And so I said, well, maybe I better meet Joe myself, and maybe cooler heads will prevail. So I called Joe up, and Joe said, oh, I hear you're an architect. And I said, yeah. He said, well, I'm having trouble with my house. Can you help me? And I said, well, sure. And I happened to be working for a firm nearby to his home in Hancock Park. So I went over, and he was getting screwed royally by the contractor. So we became fast friends after that, and actually helped him later on.
I've been to his house over there, actually. Yeah.
One of the few, I'm sure. So, but I would go there quite often because my office was close by where I was working, and he needed help with that. And he'd have the magazines, the competition out there, and he'd go, "Oh, Ed, what do you think? Who's the champion here?" And I would, I said, that looks good. So I would have fun picking covers with him.
Because he'd have that big table in his office laid out.
Yeah, that too. We were going out there. So so initially it began helping him architecturally. And then later on we became good friends. And especially before he died, we were quite close for several years.
You lived in his property here, right?
Right. Betty Weider wanted some help with...
I went to see him when he was at Turnberry at one point.
Yeah, that's great.
They were staying at Turnberry.
Yeah. So, yeah, we had, he was fun to be around, and but he wouldn't, and I would take him people to, like I remember one year I took him Mike Francois and Dennis Newman, both incredible physiques from that era. And I said, Joe, one of these guys is going to turn pro this year. Why don't you give him a contract? And he said, oh, Ed, how do you know they're going to be pro?
And they
said,
both
Joe,
turned pro.
Obvious, yeah. And so he gave Dennis Newman a contract, and then
94.
And then he gave Mike a contract after, but initially, so I took Mike to meet Mike Zampano, Champion Nutrition.
Of course, yeah.
And he gave Mike a contract, and so Joe then had to double that amount to get Mike the next year.
Mike Zampano used to send me product when I was a
great guy.
Nobody.
He actually was our janitor.
Really?
For a while before he moved on, yeah.
Well, I thought he wrote the steroid handbook, a part of that, or...
He might have contributed, but that was Dan Duchesne.
Dan Duchesne did. Was he at your gym also?
Yeah.
And the Menser brothers trained there. I remember seeing them when I went out there in 93.
Ray and Mike were good friends of mine. Mike's the only one I loaned money to that ever paid me back that I can think of.
Talk about Chris Aceto.
Well, Chris somehow came to me, or I came to him looking for a job.
He came up for the muscle camps, actually, yeah.
I was going to muscle camps, and we were sending people out to help our supplement line. We needed more help, and I was impressed with it. He went to the same school that John Cena went to.
And same with Jeff King was there, too.
Jeff King was really incredible physique. I touched base with him for my book, actually. So, yeah, Chris seemed like a smart guy and knowledgeable. And I gave him an office and essentially a secretary with our receptionist. Because again, this is back in the day when it's hard to reach people. There's no, voicemail or everyone have a phone. Or so Chris, we would send out to teach gyms about nutrition and our supplement line. That was when it was a new world. Actually, Pete Grimkowski was ahead of his time because he had his own supplement line, creatine. But it was Bill Phillips who really revolutionized the supplement world with the creatine and his. I knew Bill from, his.
Was he a bodybuilder also?
Yeah, he was. He was part of the underground supplement business.
And Chris worked for you. You gave him a job and everything, and he became the nutritionist of the gym because he told me like Chris Cormier came to Bob Harris was around at that point.
What happened? It was Derek Barton who handled our PR.
Yeah, I remember Derek. Yeah,
send him actors or actresses who needed a supplement program. Keep in mind, this is when the whole world is in infancy. Trainers, trainers didn't exist, personal trainers, and people weren't giving people printouts on what to eat, and the knowledge of what to eat was primitive.
What was a personal trainer getting paid when they first started at Gold's Venice?
Well, we outsourced it right away, and Tim and I did not charge. We decided not to charge anything.
No rent or anything
until it got to a point where it was overwhelming the front desk because they were getting calls from clients, and they couldn't have. Obviously in LA everyone's late in traffic, right? So our front counter staff was getting deluged with phone calls. So we said, well, you need to add more staff. We're going to have to charge we started out $100 a month. When I sold in 99, or actually 2004, it was $425. But we had 125 trainers paying us rent. So it was $60,000 a month, free pretty much of us doing it. And it made the gym a safer, better place.
But that allowed for the expansion too. I mean, you had room after room, and then the rent goes.
Yeah.
Now it's owned by Google, correct?
Right.
And what happened to the whole thing disappearing? At one point, Google was going to kick Gold's Gym out, I thought. And did Arnold save it?
I think Arnold saved it.
And do you think long term what do you think?
Well, Arnold's a year younger than me, or 2 years younger, actually.
He's 77 or?
78.
Okay.
So, God bless him. I hope he lives long because I think he could talk sense into them. I mean, Google has their own gym. I actually talked to them. I said, why don't you let your geeks, we can work out a membership deal for Gold. They should mix with real people, right? But they've got 6,000 employees, across the street and around Gold's Gym.
It's next door, yeah. It's right there. Yeah.
Next to Gold's Gym. They want to wall off the entire area, make it, Google campus. But I mean, it's at one point Venice Beach was the second most visited tourist attraction in LA County after Universal Studios, and I think Gold's Gym is part of that culture. So it's a shame that they're not more open to that.
So do you think Europe will just, the IFBB and they've expanded now internationally tremendously.
Yeah.
We've seen more now international people competing in the U.S. than I feel like ever before. And they're getting known. I mean, look at Samson right now, Hadi Chupin.
Yeah.
We had a whole flourish of people that were in the top.
William Bonnick, Rolly, all those.
Yeah.
Very few are still from America in that top group.
That's what I mean. It's a whole different world, but they're different.
Why didn't you ever migrate and live in Europe, Ed, if you like it so much?
Actually, I was. On 9/13/2001, 2 days after 9/11, I had a ticket to fly to Rome to buy a 12th century castle 50 kilometers north of Rome in Orvieto, Italy, for $1.2 million with 10 acres of vineyard. I was going to move to Italy and learn to grow grapes. That would have changed my life. I wish.
Do you wish you did it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why, and now you have no vision of that? Is it just...
I'm 80 years old. Owning property right now makes no sense to me.
And where are you residing at the moment?
Right now, I was living in Texas. Right now, I'm in LA. I'm actually working on a new gym project in Las Vegas.
So you think you'll be migrate here and stay here?
Possibly.
It'd be nice to have you in Vegas. I mean, it seems like this is now kind of the Mecca.
LA is dead. LA will not come back in my lifetime.
No.
It's sad.
It's just the cost of living's driven people, the politics. And
so much is closed or gone. The road's closed. I don't know if you knew. Closed. But, they were at, I don't know, $15, $16 glasses of wine. It's a different world, thanks to Google. I mean, Snapchat was invented.
Yeah, the Rose Cafe closed. You're right.
Yeah.
It's done now? Totally?
Well, it's there, but it's no longer, I guess it's for rent.
Oh, so there's no restaurant.
Google feeds their people.
And what do you think about that whole main street now that had Powerhouse and Shotzi's and...
It's a different world. I mean, I walk that area right now. I try to do 10 to 20,000 steps a day.
So you're that area. You're still living around that area right now?
I'm staying close to that area, and I walk it all the time. The promenade is dead. The mall is dead. The Santa Monica Mall. I would say a third of the storefronts are empty. The Apple Store is the only thing going on the promenade. Abbot Kinney is ridiculous. Rents. It's all millennial. It's Gen Z and millennials that are making $100,000 a year. Average Google salary is $100,000.
And that's not much in California.
Well, it's still enough to live okay in Venice. Not buy a house, but yeah. So it's just a different world. I mean, change. That's the message in my book. Change is the one constant.
I was asking him, you stepped away, but
Yeah.
I why didn't you move to Europe? And he said he did. He wanted to grow grapes in Italy.
Yeah.
And he talks about this all the time. Is he just thinks that the U.S. is going to price a lot of people out.
Yeah.
I just don't think America is going to be sustainable long term with the healthcare cost and the cost of everything. And then you travel around the world and you realize we're paying sometimes 10 times what the rest of the world does. And the quality of life is so much better when you travel around the world.
At my age, I have friends in the hospital dying, and I'm appalled at what I see. And that's one reason I would love to see every gym in America get into the longevity business.
It's a good thing to think of.
Let's give medicine a run for the money. Let's give our healthcare system a run for the money.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been promoting this your whole life, though.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really your vision. This is your word towards. I mean, you've been involved in the gym.
Well, I'll show you my latest, what I'm working on after this is over. But this is my swan song potentially would be to start another gym chain that would have this. If I fail, then I'm going to move to Europe probably, because I have friends living in Europe now, and like you said, the quality. And I love my red wine, and I could sit in a nice piazza in Europe and drink red wine and have some cheese and be quite happy.
See, we go down. My girl's from South Africa, so we go down to Cape Town, and it's
Cape Town it's in my book, I think, but that's the one. It's one of the few areas in the world with weather like L.A.
He says it.
I told Jay, I said,
for Christmas this year.
I went this last year. We're going again this year. It's the first place I've been to that has weather like California, mountains like Colorado, and the ocean. Yeah. And it does. I've never seen anything like it.
It's a fantastic place. Unfortunately, it's just they got bad government.
Yeah.
But hopefully that will change. But yeah, the only other area is the coast of Chile, which it'll be hard to live in. Yeah. And the other is, of course, the Mediterranean. Yeah. Which was where I was kind of going with my.
Well, where Dorian Yates is living in the States, say is really nice now. Yeah. Marbella, Spain.
Just if you make more than $2,000 a month, you're in the top 2% of incomes in Portugal. I love.
How's my Portuguese passport?
I love Lisbon, and the medical care there. Even if you have to pay for it, it's concierge medicine. It's high quality for not a lot of money.
So why don't you is that a good place to go?
I'm actually going there after FIBO.
I'm going there in June.
I'm going to check it out. I'm disappointed. Again, I didn't vote for Trump, and I'm surprised that a majority of Americans did, because to me he's just a sociopath and not my idea of a leader. My leader is someone who would wants his men to live, or is I was in the military. You want someone who wants you to survive. And I don't think Trump only cares about himself.
I told Jay, I don't think I've came across like someone I was very confident in my lifetime.
Well, he couldn't write a book or read a book. I mean, it's he's got the vocabulary of a fifth grader. I like some of the things that are happening.
Of course, yeah.
Government waste and all that. But I mean, this whole tariff thing. I mean, to me, it's a no-win. I mean, the markets don't like uncertainty. We've lost $5 trillion in the market, on paper, $5 trillion in the last since he became president. That's not good for people's IRAs or whatever. So no, I just and the people he's put in charge of these various. I do like Kennedy actually. I think if bird flu or swine flu or some goddamn flu comes along again, we won't get crazy with the vaccines. So yeah, I mean, Robert Kennedy, as crazy as he seems to be, is still kind of appealing to me. Based on, I'm so angry about COVID, the way it was handled. I mean, it was
people's lives were ruined.
People took a lot of years away from us, to be honest.
Yeah,
as weird as it sounds, it could take 30 years to even recover.
You know how they're talking about bird flu now and all the trend. I mean, it's scary to me. No, I'm right now on the edge. Either I'll start a new gym chain or I will retire to Europe. I'm this close right now.
And you still have the drive. You wake up in the morning and you still have this anxiety to do these things, or
well, you'll see my presentation, my business plan. But no, because I see something that people don't see. I mean, we're going to go to the Health and Fitness Association trade show tomorrow and next day, and it's like a liars convention because no one is really doing that well right now. I mean, I know gym owners all over the country. Nobody. And I have former house guests who work in gyms, and they're my my army.
Your perception may be different as successful because you ran a massive.
Well, I'm talking about even making money. I mean,
fake it till you make it.
Yeah, I mean, owners I know that are even if they have 8 gyms or 10 gyms, 5 are making money, 5 are losing. I've been there. But COVID had changed everything. I mean, change is one constant, but it's going to come faster now because of COVID. We got to get smarter about how we handle it.
Well, listen, I want you to open the floor for anything before anything. Promote the book. Where can they get it? You have an audio version also,
right.
Correct?
Actually, I just narrated. Maybe the one reason my voice is not great. I just narrated a version that's available on Amazon. So if you're a member of their audio club, it's probably free. So this is $11.99 on Amazon only. Unfortunately, not in bookstores. But
how can they get a signed copy? Is the question.
They could go to my Instagram account, Gym Architect, and send me a message, and I could send one.
You ship them out to people.
Yeah. So, Gym Architect. You can see some of my big friends.
We'll put it in.
Yeah. We'll put a link
I'm
in the bottom
Facebook
so people
as
can
Edward
buy it.
Connors, but again, it's the first part of it is on the history of the fitness industry. The second is on some of my house guests, and the third is on the evolution of Gold's Gym. To me, it's a good American story.
Well, it talks a lot about the passion, the commitment that you had. Once again, you left a huge mark on so many people, including myself. Yeah. And like we said, we were excited to have you on here. I know it's been lengthy, so we'll wrap it up. But
it's been great fun because it's just.
I have so many questions. I mean, you're probably just sitting there saying, "God, where is Jay even coming up this?" Because sometimes we do these pods, and when I have a personal relationship, like I said, out of anyone we've had on the podcast, you and Chris Aceto are the longest running relationships that I've had.
And you probably are the longest. You probably have the most fitness experience / knowledge, probably anyone in the world right now.
Yeah. Well, I've seen more gyms than anyone in the world.
I'm not going to ask you what's your favorite equipment or.
I wanted to ask. I actually wanted to say.
That's a good question, Jay, because I don't believe, and Pete, Tim, and I did not believe that any one equipment company makes it all. I really love the gyms where I see a mixture. And I think this is one thing that hurt, say, 24-Hour Fitness or Planet Fitness. They make a deal with one manufacturer. And there's some bad equipment out there now. Even, you don't
have to name them, but
we know there's some real.
So no, I really, I'm a big fan of Precor because if you lease cardio equipment, you get a maintenance agreement with it. And Precourt, in my opinion, had the best, least breakdown rate. So no, I'm a big fan of Matrix. No, but no one makes it. No one's perfect.
Of course.
You want variety.
That's why we see a lot of these brick and mortar gyms now, especially. They're handpicking, like they're finding, flex equipment. Mark now is blown away on how much people are paying for this.
30% of gyms in America have closed permanently. There's a lot of used equipment out there.
Old stuff that's made
some
right.
of it is great. Initially, there was a problem buying that because if someone got hurt on it, like Dan Bly, Flex, where
The Smith machine,
horrible lawsuit. But see, if you don't buy a Smith machine, buy their calf machine.
What about like the chain driven Nautilus, like the Arthur Jones stuff that
They
people
got
can
some
stick their finger in?
They're still great.
I know.
I mean,
they still have them at Gold's Venice. Like,
Yeah.
do you remember putting those pieces in?
In fact, that's the biggest thing I missed in my book, and I regret and I apologize. I didn't mention how significant Nautilus was back then. But they're like the cat with 9 lives. They've been around.
Yeah, but they were built so tough, man. Like, for those still to be in
They're
Venice
still
Golds,
going, yeah.
we have a bunch of the gyms. When you find those,
The Fit
that is
Club
the
has
biggest.
a bunch of them.
Yeah.
That's
right around
the,
the corner.
and you've been to Fit Club
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
That is the hardest.
Yeah.
Like when you find those, you're like, oh my gosh, I found this piece of equipment.
There's a lot out there, and I would encourage anybody who's starting a new gym to look for bargains and old equipment that's been refurbished.
So I want to ask you, since you've seen everybody, who is the greatest bodybuilder of all time, physique wise, and the greatest bodybuilder as far as just greatest bodybuilder?
I guess Arnold. Yeah.
Arnold.
I mean, he's amazing. If he has that persona where if he would walk into a room, you would know that he was somebody special. I mean, his latest book is a great read, by the way, and he gets personal in it. He tells his first book, which was
He did Total Recall.
well, I called it partial recall.
Okay.
because he didn't recall Joe.
Really?
But his new book does, and he's got some great. I'm not a big fan of self-help books, but he makes a lot of very good points in his latest book. But you look at his life. I mean, it is really amazing. And he, when he's out in the public, I mean, he's still taking selfies at Gold's Gym Venice in the morning when he works out. Lou Ferrigno wouldn't do that. Most of the guys wouldn't do that. He's just an exceptional person.
I get kind of somewhat annoyed when the modern people kind of pile on Arnold for whatever reason, not realizing if it wasn't for him, none of this shit would be here.
Do you think Arnold is one of the top 5 known persons in the world?
Yeah, I would say.
Like, we ask this question all the time. Like, who would, like, even the younger generation, they would know. Like, back in, like, when he was an action star, I felt like probably, but today's world, like, I mean, we talk about The Rock.
They're still not
Donald
big a
Trump.
star as him, though.
Yeah, Cena is becoming quite well known. I mean, I'm amazed when I'm overseas or
You mention his name to people, yeah.
It's like, actually, I tried to get Arnold to write the foreword for my book, but it was during COVID. I couldn't reach him, and John was happy to do it. And I'd love if I can end with this. It's I mean, this is the stuff that makes my life worth living, or makes. He says. Ed is and always has been honest, yet not condescending, curious but without judgment, and inspiring without any other motive than to see people become their best selves. I love him, and I'm thankful the universe put him in my path exactly when it did, because if there was no Ed Connors, there would be no John Cena, and for that I am truly grateful.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So
Makes you feel good when you read that,
yeah,
right?
yeah, very good. I'm getting goosebumps.
Like I said, people that you've helped,
Yeah.
recognizing you
Yeah.
and paying it forward.
Well, listen, we loved having you on. We'll probably do it again at some point. And we love your
See you in
insight on
FIBO.
everything. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and we hope you enjoy your trip to Vegas.
If you're open to FIBO, to meeting some new talent.
Dude, you always bring them to
Yeah.
me. You know that.
Yeah.
I give them the good. Yeah, if it wasn't for
Yeah.
Connors, it wouldn't have happened for me.
Yeah.
I know they people hit me up all the time and like, Ed Connors told me, and I'm like, oh man, Ed
Well,
finds them all.
I tell them to mention my name, because then you'll know you're not wasting your time. Because that's another thing that I would do, is that, again, they don't dare to, especially Europeans. Europeans are even Canadians are different. Canadians are not Americans. They don't dare to dream like we do.
And that's kind of your message.
Yeah. And that is my message to these people. I mean, like this kid and the 2 bodybuilders in Spain that are phenomenal, but neither speak English. I said, God damn it, learn English. And they're in their early 20s. You know both of them.
Yeah.
And I don't think they'll be either one will be at FIBO. But I said, you go, you could be Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
I'm not bullshitting you. So that's why, you help get me credibility, because people just, especially Europeans, they're not like Americans.
Well, we look forward to it, man. It's good to have you on, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
I knew that'd be a lengthy one.
Yeah.
How long?
2 hours and